The story begins on a dark and gloomy battlefield, littered with lifeless bodies, where crows feast upon the remains of the fallen. Amidst this macabre scene, an injured girl sits on the cold ground, nursing a wound on her chest. Frustration and anger consume her as she curses those responsible, regretting her misplaced trust in them. Suddenly, a figure cloaked in a hood, radiating a white aura, approaches the scene. The enigmatic figure strides towards an injured man, seemingly amazed by his survival amidst the gruesome battle. In the pink-haired girl's thoughts, she recognizes the man as Phantom Spear Guai Chang, known for his title. The figure engages the man in conversation, acknowledging his fulfillment of a promise and expressing the intention to honor their agreement. The figure inquires about the man's desires, suggesting the possibility of revival, only to be met with a refusal. The man's response remains unspoken but conveyed through his thoughts as the girl continues to communicate with him mentally. He seeks to send back his memory and the emotions he experienced in this place. The figure reflects on the difficulty of granting even this wish, apologizing for the limitations. With tears welling up in the man's eyes, a poignant expression of his pain and loss, the figure confesses its confusion about the man's initial wish. It questions why he didn't ask for revival instead, pondering the wisdom of choosing a clean slate and a place to return to. The pink-haired girl interjects, understanding the man's reasoning. Acknowledging the girl's heritage, the figure addresses her as a descendant of the royal family, specifically identifying her as the Venerable Gula. It reveals that the kingdom has fallen and the gates are likely compromised. In light of these circumstances, the figure questions the man's reluctance to ask for revival, expressing its own regret. The figure describes the man as someone destined to lead others, shining brightly like a star. It laments that his demise resulted from his own actions, wondering why humans often learn to regret only when everything is already over. At this moment, the girl tears a necklace adorned with a pink stone, a symbol that holds significance for the figure. Despite the constraints imposed by the royal oath, the figure offers to grant the man's personal wish. In response, the man conveys his contentment with receiving a gift from death, expressing gratitude for the honorable nature of the earthlings they encounter. The figure questions if they are prepared to accept the consequences, emphasizing that the man can never return to the past and will only vaguely remember his yearning and regret. In a display of determination, the girl affirms her willingness to grant the man's wish, prompting the figure to invite her closer. Suddenly, wings materialize, revealing the figure's true form as a mystical entity. With its powers, the entity envelops the girl in a radiant light, promising to eagerly anticipate their future meeting. As the man stands amidst the luminescence, a crystal emerges from his chest and ascends into the sky. Shattering into fragments, the scene transitions abruptly to a bustling casino, where people engage in the thrill of gambling on a roulette wheel. Talk about anticlimactic hub. The protagonist, now sporting a tracksuit, experiences intense anxiety as he bites his nails, yet eventually decides to risk all his money on the number 0. The frustrated protagonist, overwhelmed by his apparent loss, unleashes a loud expletive and vents his anger by kicking a nearby trash can. Two men who were smoking nearby engage in a conversation, observing the protagonist's outburst. They speculate about the reasons behind his distress, suggesting that he might have lost his mortgage or something of similar significance. One of them mentions having seen him 3 to 4 years ago, noting that despite his youthful appearance, he should now be in his mid-20s. The men reminisce about the protagonist's past fame, albeit acknowledging that he was never particularly outstanding. They ponder what might have caused his current predicament, mentioning his sudden change in attitude and nonsensical ramblings. Meanwhile, the frustrated protagonist lowers his gaze and contemplates his situation, expressing his frustration and determination to give it another try. He yearns for one last successful venture that would allow him to start anew, emphasizing his need for cash. Amidst this scene, a stylish blonde man enters a coffee shop, exuding an air of self-assurance. He casually places his phone on the counter and charmingly winks at the girl working there, boldly asking for her number. However, the girl politely declines his request. The blonde man sighs in response. Two other girls, also employees of the coffee shop, engage in a conversation about the stylish man's appearance. They assign points to different aspects of his look, discussing his figure, face, and clothes. Collectively, they rate him at 15 points, acknowledging that it's been a while since they've encountered someone so noteworthy. However, one of the girls remarks that even though it's commendable, it's still not sufficient. At this point, the first girl reprimands them for their behavior. As another customer enters the shop, the worker's expression suddenly changes drastically. However, before she can greet the newcomer, the protagonist walks in, his appearance resembling that of a bootleg roadman straight from Seoul's sewers. He passes by the girl and orders an Americano. As he sits down, a girl wearing glasses informs him that they require payment in advance. Another girl interjects, offering to make the coffee. She prepares the drink and delivers it to the protagonist, who then asks to speak with the manager. The four-eyed girl, identified as manager Yusionwa, approaches the protagonist, who presents her with an insect found in his coffee. Startled, the girl exclaims in fear, denying the possibility of such an occurrence. The protagonist, growing angrier, questions whether she is insinuating that he is a liar. At this moment, the girl decides to intervene and handle the situation. She takes a seat in front of the protagonist and asks him what he is doing. Sarcastically, he replies, suggesting he is asking for emotional damage compensation due to his fragile heart. He continues to complain about being told to break up and not being spoken to at all, demanding to know how manager Yusionwa plans to make amends. Manager Yusionwa reaches for her phone, reminding the protagonist that he had sent her money when she was studying abroad. The protagonist expresses his surprise, thinking she had forgotten. She responds that she hadn't forgotten and had also sent him money out of concern that he might starve in a foreign land. She confirms the transfer of 2 million won, stating that this concludes their connection and she has nothing to do with him anymore. The protagonist's tone softens as he addresses her, accusing her of mocking him. He questions whether she thinks of him as a homeless person. The protagonist's words surprise manager Yusionwa, who responds with confusion. He continues, expressing his disappointment and reminding her that she relied on him when she was going through a difficult time. She emphasizes that he was the only reason she persevered, even when she wanted to give up. However, she laments the change she sees in him, questioning how he could break apart like this. Internally, he reflects on the cause of their current situation, blaming it on a past loss that haunts him. The protagonist appears emotionally drained and lost in his thoughts, pondering how everything led to this point. The protagonist begins to recount his past, revealing a special ability he possessed since birth. By focusing his attention on his eyes, he could make organisms and objects emit green lights. If he interacted with things illuminated by the green lights, nothing out of the ordinary occurred. However, if he engaged with objects or organisms that lacked the green lights, there was a more than 50% chance that something bad would happen. This meant that less than half the time, he could expect something positive to occur. To test his ability, he chose to visit a casino. In the first year, luck was on his side, and he enjoyed a winning streak. He recalls starting with 100,000 won and quickly turning it into 5 million won in just 2 days. During that period, he had an abundance of money. However, as he used his ability more frequently, he began experiencing migraines and insomnia. The once easily visible green lights required significant concentration to perceive faintly. Eventually, after falling seriously ill, his ability vanished. Unfortunately, by that time, he had become addicted and lost everything he had. The narrative shifts back to the present, where the protagonist is sitting on some stairs, visibly depressed and drinking. He contemplates the possibility of making a comeback and restoring everything to how it used to be. However, he is uncertain about the path forward and wonders how he can achieve his goal. As he falls asleep, the crystal that was previously removed from his body reappears and enters his head, leading him to dream about the time he nearly died and was reincarnated. In his dream, he relives his experiences and recalls his fervent desire to start over. Suddenly, he awakens, breathing heavily, and experiences a severe headache. Confused by the intense pain, he smokes a cigarette and wonders why his heart aches and what the crystal did to him, while memories of his ex-girlfriend resurface. Determined, he rises to his feet, reaching into his pocket to retrieve the money he had. To his shock, he realizes that it is missing, leading him to question where it has gone. The protagonist thoroughly checks his pockets, realizing that the money is indeed missing. Frustrated, he contemplates the possibility that someone took it while he was asleep. He laments the lack of CCTV footage to help him identify the culprit and berates himself for not considering such a possibility. Feeling enraged, he shouts loudly, expressing his anger and the significance of the money that was stolen from him. As he walks down the stairs towards the water, he starts to think that he would rather die than continue living in such a desperate situation. He apologizes inwardly to his parents and his ex-girlfriend's son HWA. Overwhelmed by his emotions, he breaks down in tears, gazing at the water. Strangely, as his tears touch the water's surface, a green light emerges and envelops him, surprising him with its reappearance. He wonders how this could be possible. At that moment, a woman appears behind him, descending the stairs, and announces that the water is very cold these days. She introduces herself as Hannah Kim, a team leader at Shinyo, and explains that she is there to offer consultation. The protagonist recognizes her words as something he thought to himself earlier. Suddenly, He feels a sharp pain in his head and realizes that he had a similar experience in a dream before encountering this situation. Hana urges him to step out of the water, mentioning that today is a bit special. She hands him her business card, introducing herself as the team leader at Shinya. The protagonist takes a look at the card and finds himself thinking about the term meat shield. He questions why he would think of such a phrase. Hana interrupts his thoughts, suggesting that they get straight to the point due to time constraints. She reveals a bag full of cash and proposes a gamble to him, expressing his reluctance to gamble and his curiosity about how she knows him. The protagonist receives a nonchalant response from Hana. She insists that it doesn't matter and emphasizes the opportunity to win a considerable sum of money in just one round. She mentions his debt and tries to convince him to consider her offer. However, he dismisses her inquiry, focusing on his own questions. Hana admits to conducting background research before their meeting and apologizes for not informing him earlier. The protagonist ponders the significance of the money in Hana's bag and wonders why Shinya would be interested in hiring him. He realizes that there is something more important at stake. Suddenly, he recalls the phrase meat shield and decides to challenge Hana, refusing her proposal. She attempts to persuade him further, urging him to listen to the terms before making a final decision, assuring him that he won't lose anything by just listening. Unyielding, the protagonist confidently declines, stating that he is not interested. Hana acknowledges his determination and reaches for her phone, seemingly ready to move on. She mentions that a spot has just been filled coincidentally, apologizes for any inconvenience caused, and wishes him luck. As she starts to walk away, the protagonist catches her attention and boldly asserts that he wants an invitation instead of a contract, revealing his desire to be recognized and valued. The scene shifts to the protagonist engaging in a fierce battle with a colossal monster, effortlessly displaying his formidable powers. He defeats the monster and soon finds himself confronted by a swarm of new adversaries. Reflecting on his dream, he recalls his relentless fighting until his eventual death, and the plea he made to the god for a fresh start. He recognizes that the encounter with the woman played a pivotal role in that dream. Meanwhile, the woman grows impatient and questions whether the protagonist is already affiliated with the other side. He responds, indicating that she should know the answer better than anyone else. She contemplates the situation, realizing that if he had already been to the other side, there would be some sort of marker aura on him, but he appears to be clean. She asks him who approached him first, to which he deems it unimportant. She challenges his statement, considering his ability to distinguish between a contract and an invitation. Pointing at her, he emphasizes his preference for an invitation over a contract. Crossing her arms, the woman demands an explanation for his insistence on an invitation. He reasons that if given a choice, an invitation would naturally be preferred. She presses further, questioning why she should use her precious invitation on a seemingly worthless gambler like him. He nonchalantly shrugs, asserting that it would be problematic for her if she didn't grant him an invitation. He then mentions Shinyang Corp, noting their frequent appearances in the news since developing a groundbreaking drug a few years ago, speculating on its possible connection to the other world. Outraged, she dismisses his thoughts, doubting that people would listen to the words of a crazy gambler like him. He casually responds while she pokes his nose, acknowledging that she may be right. However, he suggests that her superiors might not share the same perspective, insinuating that her inability to form a contract or keep a secret may not bode well for her. She retaliates, shouting profanities at him. Undeterred, he proposes a compromise, asking for just one invitation. She clarifies that contracts and invitations are entirely different matters, admitting that she can form contracts but lacks the authority to grant invitations. He smiles and reminds her of her earlier statement, where she referred to the invitation as her precious. She clenches her lips in anger, realizing that his memory is unnecessarily sharp. Succumbing to defeat, she lowers her head and explains that she would need permission to grant invitations. The woman retrieves something from her bag, recalling the moment when she received it from the entity encountered in the first episode. The scene shifts to the statue-like entity, and it tells her to keep the object safe, as she will soon require its use. Confused, she asks about the timeline, and the entity cryptically responds, implying that she will find herself in a situation where she has no choice but to utilize it. As the woman finishes reminiscing about how she received the golden stamp, she swears and flips off the entity, feeling frustrated by the situation it had referred to. While the protagonist continues poking his nose nonchalantly, she observes that he possesses talent instead of being a mere slave. She also considers his resemblance to a veteran who has spent a few years on the other side, and recalls the prophecy made by the goddess. She informs him that there is a condition, to which he responds by telling her to spill it. She lays out the conditions. First, he must swear that he has never entered that world before, here and now. He confidently swears, oblivious to the fact that his dreams have actually taken place. Unaware of his experiences, she proceeds with the second condition, stating that if she grants him the invitation, he must reveal his secrets about who he met and what he heard from them. He firmly declines, stating that he has nothing else to say on the matter. Curiosity piqued, she tempts him by mentioning a special invitation. He contemplates for a moment and replies that perhaps he would consider revealing his secrets if he were to trust her more in the future. However, in his thoughts, he realizes that it would be wiser to keep his dreams a secret, as they are his only advantage. Disbelievingly, she sighs and presents the final condition. If he does end up entering the other world, he must strike a deal with her before anyone else. He contemplates the word entering, but deduces that since she mentioned a deal, she must have given up on the slave contract. As she cleans her glasses, she assures him that as long as he's not a total dumbass, she will make his entry happen no matter what. He accepts her terms, and she reaches inside her bag, retrieving the golden stamp. Walking towards him, he inquires about the gold stamp's purpose. With determination, she grabs him and shouts that it's her life, stamping his hand forcefully. The stamp emits a powerful light, marking him as an invited participant.